It's actually Mina O'Neill's foray. She looks after the O'Neill investment property portfolio. She's actually the brains behind the operation, if you haven't yet worked it out.
It's a day-to-day, everyday, all-day management system. I don't know about that. He's so busy. It's fantastic. I'd love him. I mean, I look up to him a lot, to be fair. I find his mind boggling. He's amazing how much thought goes into that. For me, I want every day to be a challenge. I want to be able to grow.
Really?
I do.
Why?
I like it.
Why do you like it?
I don't like being bored.
You need to be hyper-organised.
Yes, definitely.
Hyper-organised.
Once it's acquired and settled, that's where I kind of come into play. Does the algorithm work? Is it going to give me the same outcome? Where can I fix this? Can I speak to my broker? I think we did it once. I drove past and we got a KFC. It was really exciting because we owned it.
G'day, how you going? Phil Tarrant, co-host of Inside Commercial Property. Hope you're well. Recording on our 61st episode. I don't know if you tuned into it yet. Our special 60th episode, 5 years of recording this podcast. Last month, you should go and dial in. Myself and Scott factored in on just reminiscing of 5 years together, trying to navigate commercial property and discussing what's going on with Australian investors. But we broke down a lot of deals, which we've been asked for some time, and we really got stuck into them. So we're going to do that a lot more often. People actually want to pull apart deals and work out what makes them tick and why they were deemed to be good investments by the team over at Rethink. But today is something very different, the other side of the ledger, which is not the buying, it's the management of commercial property. I haven't got Scott in the studio. I've put him to the side because this is not his foray. It's actually Mina O'Neill's foray. She looks after the O'Neill investment property portfolio. She's actually the brains behind the operation, if you haven't yet worked it out, but it is true. And we're going to chat through all things around managing a large commercial property. So this is not the buying, it's the managing, and it's often overlooked, but often one of the most critical aspects of investing in property.
Thank you.
Mina,
Thank you for
welcome.
having me today.
Flying solo.
Yes, I am today.
First time ever solo on a podcast?
First time, yes.
Why does it take us so long? He's been hiding you from us over all these years.
Oh, I like to say that I'm a bit of the quiet one in the background that does the work and puts my head down and bum up in that respect a little bit. I'm a bit quiet in that respect. Don't really like coming onto massive shows or anything like that.
Yeah,
but
cool. It's nice. Actually, I'm very similar. I like to fly under the radar, but unfortunately, parts of my job doesn't allow me to do that. So I completely get it. And I know you sort of, the portfolio, you're happy to share aspects of it, and I won't go into too many details around it, but I think there's quite a lot our listeners can learn from how you and Scott, Scott mainly on the property acquisition side and you on the management side, have gone about building what is a significant portfolio, which a lot of your clients, I really think, would hope to emulate at some point in time. So if we could pull that apart, we can get a bit of a sense for the systems that you use, the decision-making processes you have around managing multiple commercial properties, what you like about it, maybe what you dislike about it. I'm sure there is some dislike bits about it, but it sounds as though you have a good balance between your respective responsibilities. So we're talking about your family's portfolio here, which is quite a large portfolio. And then the last time we got together was when you were just relaunching the second version of your book, which...
It's been a while now. Rethink Property Investing.
That's right. Yes. Rethink Property Investing. That would have been like a year and a half or 2 years ago we did that.
Yes, it is a bit of a while ago. It feels like a century ago, but, I think it's because we've been doing it for so long. So I guess it just kind of becomes everyday life to us in that respect as well. And to myself, every day I do, management of the day-to-day portfolio itself as a holistic, I guess, approach to it, whether it's from, property managers to, your meetings every week, to catch up on everything that's been happening. It's a day-to-day, everyday, all-day management system. So basically. You're
really the real brains behind his portfolio. It's not Scott. He's not here, so he can't defend himself. So, and I won't be defending him.
I can't say that. I can't take that all on myself, to be honest.
But to the point, it's a real balance, right?
It is, yes.
So you've organically, I think, probably landed at, Scott probably does the strategy and the process around acquisition.
Yes.
And then you're sort of charged with accountability for managing it.
Exactly. So basically, Scott will, as he does for our clients as well, and as the team does as well. So we basically make sure that, we acquire the perfect property for the goal sets that the client requires, as well as myself. We have a specific goal set of what we'd like to achieve in the portfolio. So we make sure that we get that property. Once that property is acquired, once all the due diligence and everything's been covered, whether it's residential or commercial, but obviously ourselves now we're stemming into commercial every day more and more. That's our direction for our portfolio. And I guess once it's acquired and settled, that's where I kind of come into play. Mind you, I do also deal with, the lending behind it as well, and the documentation and making sure everything's done on time. So once we actually acquire, the sale's kind of been processed, I kind of delve into it too. So I speak to our brokers, I speak with the banks. We set up the right way to be able to have it in our systems, whether it's, through your banking platforms or, your accountant platforms, all that kind of stuff. And then obviously we've got our own way of managing it ourselves, which is a bit old school, I guess, in that respect. I love Excel spreadsheets, but that's kind of just me because I like to be able to manually see every day what I put into this portfolio. And then you got your agents after that. But it's a process, basically. So from start to finish, I guess, from there onwards until it's settled. And then onwards after that, that's kind of where my role comes into.
So you need to be the interface between all moving parts to essentially get the deal done. So Scott will identify a good asset and all the reasons why it's a good asset, but then you're got to work with the accountants to ensure that. Exactly. So you got to have intimate understanding of all the financials of everything, where everything lives, how it all works.
Exactly. And
storing it all that sort of administrative stuff around it.
Exactly. And it's how are we going to manage it after we acquire it, where does it fit into the equation for the portfolio to get to the, I guess, end game. Not that there is an end game for us at this stage, to be honest. We want to grow it as much as we possibly can. But it's almost to just see where is it placed amongst all the rest of them to be able to make sure that we get the best outcome for ourselves in growth as well.
Okay, so lots of bits there for us to pull apart. And you sort of pick up point you say around Excel. A lot of people are always looking for the next big shiny thing for helping people manage stuff. And I'm the same. I wouldn't say I was analog in our way. I don't have filing cabinets with files in them, but everything's sort of obviously digital. But, it's hard to find specific ways, one thing that manages everything, right? You've got to use a mixture of different stuff. So what's your background originally, like from a professional sense?
So basically I used to really enjoy working in real estate, so all through high school and as well after that in different internships and different avenues that I sourced through university. I really did love the real estate part of working into it. So I started at front desk. I did a lot of work with at the time, it was actually my uncle's agency. Okay. So he gave me a job at the front desk. So I used to, bring in the money for all the rentals, check out who's going online and what the new rentals are all about, what's the new sales aspect, delving into a bit of those policies with them and stuff like that. So I used to help them basically do everything in the back end. And I've always had an enticement to try and get into that field myself. So operationally kind of tied in with my background, but as well as being exposed to it. And family-wise, my dad was someone that used to love, building, so he would buy properties. So would buy property in Sydney, for example, and he'd build on it because he knew that there would be a lot of value later on in reselling it if one day he wanted to retire on it. So it kind of was always in my background of my knowledge, I guess. And I've always had family members, including myself, always been exposed to it, which is kind of why I guess my brain just naturally kind of filters through that direction, if that makes sense.
So you absolutely. So if I looked inside your brain and looked at the architecture, how you're wired, you're very systems process oriented. Very much. So sequence is key, right?
Very
this,
much.
then that, then that. But to your point around, working on the front desk, I think we're losing a bit of that these days. A lot of people don't want to do that work anymore. They'll think, that's a bit beneath me and this, that and the other. But it's absolutely critical because, you learn functionally at a real organic level how things work.
Exactly.
And you probably still, lean on that knowledge and insights.
Exactly.
Because property investment and managing property is largely reasonably straightforward.
Yeah.
But you need to be hyper-organised.
Yes, definitely.
Hyper-organised.
You need to start at the beginning. I think that, being able to be organised within yourself, sit down, be able to have a holistic understanding of what's coming in and out of a property and day-to-day, mundane bits and pieces that you might come across, no matter what it is in life. That's kind of the same structure I use when I manage the portfolio as well. So, sitting at the front desk, it means you have an interaction with different various people, different various clients, different people, like agency side, to be able to actually put it into the responsibilities of actively being able to manage your portfolio. That's kind of how I started in that respect too. So my brain's always been very wide of, sit down, take it apart and make sure that you can actually implement it properly. What are the flaws? What are the assets that you've got? How can you make it work better? Mm-hmm. And people do forget, it's nice to be able to dumb it down sometimes. It doesn't have to be these massive, new age AI technology bases. It could be something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah. Oh, the Excel spreadsheet can serve you really, really well. Approaching portfolio management, was it as organised as what it was today? Was it, not too bad? How would you score yourself when you think back on it?
Well, organising myself back then, honestly, and I'm being completely honest here, even when back then, we had a couple of residential properties at the first instance when we first started, I still made sure I treated it like a big machine. And for me, the day-to-day mundane things, whether it's, calling up your agents, making sure you've got your meetings intact, see what the flaws are of the property, all that kind of stuff. I still do that. I still did that then, and I still do that today because, I saw the properties as a business in itself. It's a functional entity. We need to make sure it functions properly. For it to happen, we need to actually spend time on it every day. If you don't do that, even if it's a half an hour every day, and obviously this has grown over time. It's grown and grown and grown and grown. And the hours have become every day, 6 days a week, 7 days a week,
really? Yeah.
And it isn't something you could really forget, and leave in the background. I don't trust anyone to touch it other than myself. So even though I've got agents all around, Australia at the moment because we've got such a diverse portfolio and so many different states are touched, it's still really important to stay on them as well. Because I find if I'm not the first point of contact every morning to check what's going on and strategize where I want it to be, that's where it makes a huge difference to be able to speak with the right people on the ground to make sure that actually happens. So even at the start with 2 or 3 of them, even though the time frame that you sat there managing it may have been a lot shorter, and now it's a lot bigger because you have a lot of different touch points and much more intrinsic understanding of it is required to actually make it perform like an engine, then, back then it was just smaller time frames, that's all. But every day it becomes more and more.
It's really important sort of mindset that you approach that with, because a lot of people will think, well, you start doing it, you do all the work yourself, and then you'll get someone to do it for you in time, right? And the investors I know who have large portfolios, they're still intrinsically and intimately connected with it, but like they still don't really allow accountability of it to rest with anyone else, and the accountability is the key point. So, in many ways, you need to think and act and operate like which is what it sounds like you are, the CEO of a business. The business is, assets, and those assets are residential and commercial properties, and you sit and you orchestrate and conduct at the top line, and you're responsible for the outcome of it. Yep. That's what success needs to be.
For me, on a day-to-day basis, there's a few things that make sure that you can get to that end point of being able to have it hum in that respect. You need to be in the day-to-day activity of it, whether it's, your strong relationship with your property managers. And I found along the way this, particular point was hard. These particular people were hard to find. I found with residential, you do have people that are really great in the field, yes. But once you get into that commercial space, the leases, the amount of understanding of what is required, the budgets, all that kind of stuff. If you're not in it day to day and have someone there that's trustworthy, that actually understands what the direction the portfolio is going, it's so difficult to sit there day to day from a perspective of, being in a different state and not having someone good on the ground. So every day sitting with them is a must for us.
Well, what's been sort of the approach that you've taken, or what do you think's worked best for you that other people can learn from?
Diversifying across different asset classes, like I said industrial, retail and residential is quite important. So each of these markets, they behave differently, of course. And for example, the industrial sector slows down, vacancies take longer to fill. A strong performing residential asset in the high demand area can also help offset that. So that's kind of what I like to be able to kind of approach my portfolio like. So it benefits from exposure to different tenancy types, such as residential, corporate, government, all that kind of stuff, private and industrial tenants. If one sector or region underperforms, the others can help stabilise that in the portfolio. And I guess ongoing support is also then promoted through that. However, underperforming is not an option for me at all, personally. So hence why also our team, they make sure that we get, the right properties, at the right price with the right asset classes for the people that actually want to invest with us. So that way such situations are actually really avoided. And that's the main concern. So that's not an issue for me. I make sure that when I buy a property, that's what it's going to actually give me. And I guess another key strategy that I've, implemented myself in investing when I think about it is various locations across different states. I don't like to put everything in one basket. I like them to be spread across because it mitigates that risk as well across different states. It doesn't have to necessarily be, and I think this is a mistake that a lot of people do make, that they want to have it in reach. It's in your backyard, basically. If I can see it, I know that I can mitigate the risk. I physically can see it. And this is once again where I think if you don't need a good agent, you need a great agent to be able to have that communication and clear understanding of exactly what risks are involved with this property, what you want to get out of it, and to make sure that once they're on the ground, yourself and them are aligned. They're visiting, they're seeing things properly, they're giving you those reports, you're having a strategic understanding of where you want to take it to make sure that those risks are eliminated. You don't have your maintenance costs because they're across it. Your roof leaks, for us recently we've had a few roof leaks, with Queensland specifically. We've had a few issues with a few of our roofings over there. It's not a big deal, but as long as you've got someone there to make sure that you're across it properly, communicate it properly, cost effectively as well, then you know that you're on the ground running for it.
So again, it's being intrinsically connected with every aspect of your portfolio, not leaving anything to chance. And that goes back to the organisational sort of capabilities around it. And I think of the portfolio I've got, I've probably only ever seen half of them. Because I've used the right people at the acquisition side, but then also at the management side. And I'm okay with that. To your point, I don't need to be able to drive past it, make sure it's all okay. The stuff that I have that's in proximity, I never go and look at anyway, right?
Exactly.
I haven't seen it for years. It just really doesn't matter if you've got the right people around you. The challenge you have in growing a portfolio is when and how do you decide to acquire new properties. And then also what to consolidate. Consolidating may mean selling. How have you sort of approached that aspect of your portfolio?
Yeah, so I guess every investor has a different portfolio. That's one key, element of this as well. Unique investment goals, like I've mentioned before, and a personal appetite for risk as well. So at this stage, we own several strong performing residential properties, but not all of them align with our current focus on growing into the commercial portfolio. So for me personally, I'm really drawn to industrial. So, and bigger retail assets as well. So, for example, we've got a KFC and Hungry Jack's, which, are really amazing assets to have because, to understand the intrinsic nature behind the scenes of how they work, what they entail, what grease traps they need, things like that. Those little things. It's such a massive learning curve for me as well. So it's really great. I like the nature of the leases and I find that the asset class genuinely excites me. That's why I like to invest in them. So it also presents a great learning curve for me in motivating me to learn more about other assets around that as well and how they actually work. And that's why we're now looking at leveraging, for example, the equity we have from the residential. So you've got X amount of residential. Now, depending on the market and conditions and where it's at, do I want to sell them? Do I want to buy commercial? The ones that I actually want to work within, the ones that excite me, to make me learn every day as well. So that's, I guess, one way of being able to leverage to get into that side of it as well. While our residential investments continue to perform well, and this is the amazing thing, I don't want to let them go yet, because they are performing really well, but I'm ready for a new challenge as well, and to explore that industrial market, for example, and that retail market more. Personally, I embrace the risks that come with it as well, but I'm happy to sell out from a residential to stem into the new, and I guess a little bit of an unknown and understanding there.
You can only make those decisions if we spoke about organise and having the base portfolio working, humming along, and that's really concentrating on the day-to-day aspects of it. You spoke about it very briefly. How would you sort of crystallise these key responsibilities for managing portfolio for our listeners every day? What would be the 4 or 5 key aspects that you would define?
Yep. So I guess it's very, you need to be so organised, I find, to be able to be across every element. And I'm talking about, I go through every single element of every part of the portfolio in depth. And I do it through Excel spreadsheets, like I mentioned before. I do like them because you can customize it as much as you want. And yes, it's a very manual process, but it means that you have to actively sit there every day and check every aspect of it to a T to make sure it brings out the net worth of what you're actually producing from the portfolio holistically. So it helps us stay across all inflows, outflows, you monitor your challenges month to month, all that stuff. So in the spreadsheet, I like to include not only inflows and standard outflows, but insurance costs. So there's columns on different things, and as it progresses, I add. And that's basically what I like to do to make sure that everything's correctly outspoken. And I guess your interest repayments, your annual expenses, which can in tune also significantly impact your net income if you're not across it properly. If you forget that aspect out of it, you're not accounting for all those losses there and what your actual financial position is, right?
Yeah.
So your net income calculations are quite important to get the whole assets real performance and understanding. Each month, I also I compare the performance of individual properties as well. The assets change over how it's changed over the past year. What was it performing like last year? What's it performing like now? But I do this month to month as well. So with, for example, recent rate increases, those are factored into that spreadsheet as well. I make sure that every day, every couple of weeks, that I make sure I go back to my bank, check it. Does the algorithm work? Is it going to give me the same outcome? Where can I fix this? Can I speak to my broker? Okay, so I can see that there's something wrong here. This is too high. An interest rate is too high. Can I get a refinance? Can I get a look over the interest rate? Am I able to bring it down? Can I bring a few assets across to one bank to make sure that we can get a better rate as a holistic amount? Can we do that as an incentive to try and make sure that it actually performs well? So day to day, that's what I do.
I think what you're dispelling there is the fact that property is a passive asset. It's really active. Like, you need to be really, really involved. And again, a lot of people think technology of all these, again, social media is a hack for this and a hack for that. No real hacks for really good, smart, detailed property management. You need to be in the weeds with the numbers, and yes, there's a lot of tech tools around there that can support you with it, but you've still got to make sure the inputs are correct, and you only know the inputs are correct if they're checked. Exactly. The machine's not going to tell you something's wrong. It might give you clues that there's something wrong because the number doesn't look right, but you're going to have to interrogate around it. So Excel, I'm the same. I've created my own Excel, which most people look at and sort of their mind boggles, but works for me. But it's got all those different inputs, so I know when things are right or wrong. Well, what else how do you sort of store all your information? Do you use Google Docs? Do you use drives? Give me a sense for the operational cadence of it all. Yep.
So we do use Google Docs. We do have, and I also, funny enough, I'm a Gmail girl.
Do you like Gmail?
I do like Gmail. Yeah. It's probably the wrong way to go about it, but I do like Gmail, and I do have a very strict way of organising that Gmail.
Your Gmail. So do you have different emails for different properties, or do you have central one email that's for different trusts? How do you organise all that stuff?
Yeah, so basically I have a one Gmail account. It's the way, and I do like to separate it from work. You know, you might rethink investing account as well as my personal. I keep them separate. I like to have that organization so that way two things are separated completely. And within that actual Gmail account, I have all the properties basically. And they're all, whenever something comes in, filed.
Drag and drop.
Filed. Once it's action, filed. And it's as simple as that. It doesn't have to be rocket science. You know, it's whatever works for each individual person. And that for me works really well. But once you get a big document, you know, if you've got, you know, a property that's coming under a trust, you put the trust, you put the property. You know, if you've got big documentation that comes through from your solicitors on leases, I then go to Google Docs and then create obviously a file. It's as simple as that. And then you store everything there. So that way, if anything is needing to be reviewed again, such as a lease coming up, you know, with an option, it's finished.
You know where to find it. So with Google Docs, you obviously use Google Drive there's a property's got a drive for everything. You drag and drop and putting it. Do you go down to the level of how you name stuff? Like
yes, I sure do.
Good. Yeah.
Sure do.
Yeah, I'm super, like, people get annoyed with me of like how, you know, it's got to be the same structure every time.
Yeah. And even where you place the dot, it needs to be the right way.
It's funny, right? And you know, when an accountant looks at your stuff and they go, oh, I've seen how this person organises stuff. Yeah. They know my job's going to be easy because it's organised. It might be hard because it's complex, but it matters. Like it really matters.
It does. And you know, I do use various, of course, platforms with my accountant to share documentation across to be able to filter, you know, your statements across from every property as well. Mind you, I also file those to myself. Yeah. You know, so I don't rely on any platform. I rely on exactly what I know works for me and where I can find it. Yeah. If you're across all that, I think that's the best way possible. It's what works for you.
So if you were proverbially hit by a bus tomorrow, that doesn't happen, but like, would someone be able to go in there and understand it and pick it up pretty much straight away? Because it's important, right, to think about continuity and not to that extreme, but, you know, someone to help you manage it. Yeah, it's got to be it's just got to be it's got to have a good interface with it. You know, it's got to be quite easy to understand. Exactly. And that's the thing. It's for someone to be able to pick up and do it straight away. You know, it's an easy process. If, for example, something was to happen to me, Scott can come in and go, okay, there it is. I know where everything is. But he would know it all anyway, right? Like, largely, he'd pretend he would.
Funny enough.
He'd be able to work it out.
No,
but if it's well organised, it's just going to be logical, right? Yes. You know, just simple structures and
exactly. Yeah. And because me and him work quite well, I know how he thinks. He knows how I think. Yeah. So, you know, if I structure something a certain way, I know he'll be able to pick it up.
Would you like
It'll
to spend
be really
a day
seamless.
Inside Scott's head? Would you reckon it's sort of?
I don't know about that. He's so busy. It's fantastic. I'd love it. I mean, I look up to him a lot, to be fair. You know, I find his mind boggling. He's amazing how much thought goes into that brain of his.
He's got a good retention of information. He can find it when he needs it.
It's a passion of his. He loves it. You know, when you love it, you know, and you know what you're doing. And I guess similarly for me as well in the property management side of it, that's what I like, you know, and you know, even visiting those assets, I get excited for them and come back with all these different
ideas. When you guys
ideas.
go to KFC, do you know, get some chicken while you're there?
Scott's done it once as well. I think we've done it. I think we did it once. He went, I drove past and we got a KFC. It was really exciting because we owned it, which is cool.
So it sounds like you're going through your journey right now and how it sort of ends up. It sounds like you're quite aspirational how you want to continue to drive and create this. But what sort of the biggest challenges so far you've faced in building the portfolio? And I'm sort of quite aware of some of the early day challenges, but like, let's talk about now where you're sort of, you know, it's a large portfolio with a lot of moving parts, a lot of requirements both administratively and financially into contributions for growth, etc. But what would be those key challenges?
I guess, I mean, both of them have different challenges from residential to commercial. They're both different in the way, you know, they present those challenges as well. You know, for example, I'll give you, for residential, one of the challenges that we've, I guess, learned over the years, I know this is going a bit further back in timeline, but, you know, we used to have a dual occupancy home. You know, we bought into it. It was fantastic. It, you know, gave us that dual income, and then regulation changed and we had to have one, you know, and things weren't, you know, height-wise weren't allowed to have, etc. But, you know, in saying so, we still hold that property today. You know, it is a great performing asset still, might be just under where we wanted to project ourselves through. However, that's when we strategically change and then moved into commercial and in other assets as well. So I guess in the commercial challenges itself, my biggest concern and I guess my biggest challenge for myself is those leases. So managing vacancies in soft markets, it's also been quite a challenge. One of our commercial properties had 3 to 4 vacancies simultaneously. So, it's those things where you kind of go, okay, do we have other assets to offload that, to be able to sustain that, and which agents are on the ground and which ones can we engage with to make sure we get the right leases in place, plus have a great legal team to be able to mitigate what's internal and what we can get best out of it to grow the rest of the centre as well. So it's not just one lease that you're looking at. If you want to maximise your income with others, what's the benchmark you're going to use? So it's all those back and forth challenges. That's what I found the most hardest, I guess, there with leases.
Has there been any sort of fundamental mistake or misstep that's changed your approach? And it sounds like the key, the intersection of evolving your portfolio was this sort of mindset shift away from resi to commercial, and that's probably because you're just fatigued, like a lot of people get burned by the relentless needs of a resi property and maybe some of the negativity around it by way of cash flow and stuff. But it sounds like that has really changed the way in which you've approached the portfolio growth.
Yes, definitely has. I mean, everything has its challenges. Everything has its time, I think, as well. But it is really great, to be able to push ourselves into a different direction. And every day, is going to be, for me, I want every day to be a challenge. I want to be able to grow.
Really?
I do.
Why?
I like it.
Why do you like it?
I don't like being bored.
Okay.
And I think that's the fun thing about it. I like to have my mind constantly moving with something.
But you don't chase problems, though.
I don't, but I think I think I chase them. I think I look for them sometimes. And it's only because I'm so drastically involved every single day to make it perform the best way possible that I start to think outside the box. How can we make it a great asset? How can we not have these falls? How can we make sure that we have this lease down packed in a month real quick with a great, asset, with a great tenancy as well? And it's those challenges that I do seek. But I seek them through different avenues, such as obviously, and I do keep repeating agents because those are the people I touch point every single day from. So we've got great agents across the portfolio, which has taken time to be able to, I guess, weed out with lots of them along the way, not really seeing the direction I wanted to take. So it takes a really great agent, property manager on the ground that has aligned values with myself, that will look for those problem areas and want to rectify them as well.
So there's problem areas in every portfolio. So how long will you let something be a problem before you act on it, and or how big does something need to be a problem to actually get your attention? So you can always find issues, and I sit there a lot of times and go, oh, it's okay, I'll just leave it. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
If I had time, it would be a much bigger deal. I'd probably make it a big deal, but you just leave it alone. So how do you sort of prioritise that? Because it's a really important thing. How satisfied are you okay with some things just being okay?
I think there's that, funny enough for myself, nothing's ever okay. It always has to be perfect. I'm a bit of a perfectionist.
I get it. I completely understand it, yeah.
It's a bit of it's terrible because in myself, I'm so pedantic. So I do that within the portfolio as well. Even at my own home, I'm pedantic where things have to be. So that way I remember where things are in a structure that needs to work. Otherwise, it just doesn't flow. But in saying so, I don't sit there worrying about the nitty gritty. Like if there's a leaky tap, okay, we can get out, a plumber, we can fix that up. But if it comes to bigger ticket items like, a lease is coming up for renewal, they're not going to be renewing. We need to get someone in. The space is big. That's a big issue to me. Do we divide it up? Do we get 2 tenancies in? Do we get 1? Do we use that as a benchmark for the rest of them? Are the rest of them coming up? That's the stuff I like to sit down day to day and make sure that I'm across them all. So that's a big problem to me. But if you've got a roof issue and the tenants are also going, I've got leaks here or there, and the maintenance of the building itself is not good, then obviously, that is important. But I make sure that I have a plan of action of every month, if we have to fix an item, if the building is a bit underrun, it's time to maintain it. How can we spread it across the months to make sure that our income's also not reduced that much, to make sure that it's actually flowing through.
So it sounds like you're able to sort of get beyond your own perception of issues and get perspective of stuff, and that helps you prioritise. When you prioritise, you can therefore determine what sequence you've got to approach things
Definitely.
in. So again, it's a internal mental architecture of approaching stuff, which a lot of people would struggle with, or it takes time to learn. And these are the sort of key things I think you need as a property portfolio. You've got to train yourself on these things, and you're not going to get it right all of the time. So is this a full-time job, or when does property become a full-time job? How big does it need to be?
I love this question, and it's only because it doesn't matter how little or how many you have. From day dot, it needs to be full-time for you. If this is for me personally, it's my livelihood. It's my income. If it does not perform, if I don't look at it, it's not going to perform well. It is a full-time job from the first time you get your property, whether it's residential or commercial. Of course, with the residential, it's a bit lighter. You don't need as many touch points. You might have a leaky tap or a broken toilet or, things like that. It's a bit smaller in nature to manage, yes. However, your mortgages, if you want to refinance, when's the right time to find out what value it now has? That's all important. So it's a full-time job from the day you decide to get your first property.
And even that one to take up 40 hours a week, it needs to be a full-time mindset. And that comes back to accountability and responsibility. It's the only way you can grow your portfolio. And, things get more complicated over time, or they just get probably more complex, probably not complicated. Financing being one of them. As your financing strategy evolve, you're probably not doing today what you did 15 years ago. It must be a lot more sophisticated, your financing strategies.
It is. I guess it's about maximising that borrowing capacity for me. So it's about structuring debt smartly. For example, if you're using your interest only, periods, fixed rate loans, have you got, your cross-collateralization of strategies, just to make sure that you maintain flexibility across your borrowing capacity later on as well, But it depends on borrowing and your investment goals as well. Like, where do you actually want to be? What do you have in mind? Investing strategies are individual and they do vary across people. So having a trusted broker to make sure that you can actually move forward with those strategies is very important, So, sometimes, you might be able to acquire a loan. You've got conditions with the bank, and you need to meet XYZ in the next year, and then you can move on to the next bracket of borrowing capacity, or having to be able to, bunch them together sometimes and be able to get a better rate that way. It's all those stuff that you kind of have to consider. And
you get involved in all the fun. You deal with the brokers there. Yeah.
I think my broker hates me sometimes. No, I'm kidding.
I think my broker hates me sometimes.
The amount of touch points.
When I call out, they go, oh, okay. They just know it's going to be maybe a little bit more complicated and complex. Than
I think he kind of says to me,
"Who's your broker?"
Funny enough, we use Rethink Financing.
Okay.
Yeah. And we've
you would have thought.
Yeah, sometimes, I call up and I go, so are we going to do XYZ? We need to hold on. Just wait another 6 months, which is, it's very good. And we've known our broker for a very long time, since before Rethink Financing. So we've had a really good relationship with him, and he understands that. Yes, exactly. Yeah, he's fantastic, and he's very understanding of situations as well. So it's really great to be able to work with him, because he does have that long-term ideal in his head too.
Yeah, I'd say for commercial real estate, he's one of the best out there.
Yeah.
However, he must be if he's doing your stuff. Are you largely interest only, or you still are maximising borrowing power?
Maximising a bit of both, so a bit of everything. So in that respect, but it just depends on what comes our way and what's the best strategy at the time.
And that's the point, long-term strategy and exit planning. That's
exactly.
There's got to be a point in time where I'd imagine with a portfolio like yours, it's always going to be a full-time job.
Yeah.
There's going to have to be,
definitely,
in order for it to perform. And I can't imagine your long-term strategy is sell everything and put all that money into the bank, right? Like that's probably not your long-term strategy. But the sort of long-term goals of a well-managed portfolio are largely it shouldn't be too hungry with problems, I would say.
No.
I'd like to think so, but
look, it'll always have its challenges, of course, but, the long-term goal for me is to always stay in that game. I don't think I'd ever want to let it go. So for me, it's constant learning every single day. It doesn't matter what asset comes my way, and it's also in the leases that are structured in a particular way to be able to learn what you can get out of it mostly. But it's just staying in that game. I don't think I'd ever want to not be in it.
So how do you ensure your property is going to really sort of continue to generate wealth into retirement? I'd like to think it's probably cash flow and capital growth, but it's got to pay the bills.
Well, it's a bit of both, I guess, in that respect, but it's also staying on top of it every single day. If you're not on top of it, you're not going to gain growth out of it. But if you're not also across the market and across the time to get a good valuation to make sure that you can pull out the equity when you need it and put it somewhere else that you might need to actually invest it in. What's your goals? Every single day you should be thinking to yourself, what is your goal set? So
how do you actually find a time? Do you structure your day in a way in which you dedicate time to the portfolio?
I do. So every morning, the first thing I do is check what is coming in, what's inbound, So what do I do every day? Check what's going on. Make sure that things are actioned. Anything from the night before that's left over, I actually plan night before for the next day so I know that my day is clear and I know a good head start is happening. Whatever's come in, I make sure that I clear out. By 12 o'clock, I start doing the rest of the bits and pieces and start actioning project work. So I structure my day in like blocks, basically, other than in between also been doing pick up and drop off of kids and also being a mum in between. But at the same time, making sure that portfolio isn't dropped. And at the same time, I do have someone that works with me because it's now become such a full-time job that we need two of us across it.
It sounds like a really good job to have to provide balance and choice, right? Like, sounds like there's flexibility there as you need. But I mean, look, I've really enjoyed chatting. It's getting behind the O'Neill family portfolio. We could sort of chat all day about it. We should make sure we get you back in again because, again, like I said, people want to know more about deals. I think we've got to concentrate a lot more on this podcast around the management of and just the stuff like how do you do it? Like what tools and systems and process do you use? So we sort of spoke about them, but not in depth. So I think we'd benefit from more of that.
Great. Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
No doubt. Did you sort of chat with clients and stuff? Is that sort of with Rethink, or you normally
try to avoid that? I try to avoid that. I enjoy it and I love sharing the experiences, but I think Scott's the guy. Scott's got the guy.
Well, I'm sure you have a chat with him. rethinkinvesting.com.au is where you can track him down. But thanks for your time today. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see more of Mina, no doubt. I think Scott will say, hey, hang on a second. We're on to something here with new talent in the studio. So I look forward to that. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Until then, bye-bye.